When given the choice, I have a tendency to gravitate towards the more violent games. I like explosions and spectacle. I'm partial to colour palettes that are basically just 208 different shades of brown, which makes it all the more surprising that a game like Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin has captivated me so thoroughly. It certainly has its share of spectacle, but it's also bright and colourful and, well, it's just wonderful. If you played the original on Nintendo 3DS, you'll already know what to expect from Wings of Ruin. There are some quality of life improvements and some new features, but the bare bones mechanics are largely the same. Those coming into this spin-off franchise for the first time from World or Rise are in for some surprises. For one, don't let the beautifully twee visuals confound you. It's every inch as dense as any Monster Hunter title before it. It looks slightly kidified, sure, but if you don't know your life suck from your vital essence, you'll be on the end of something's toothpick by mid-afternoon. At face value, Monster Hunter Stories 2 is closer to a traditional JRPG than to the main Monster Hunter titles. It also riffs heavily off the 2016 anime featuring some of the characters, places and events, so if you never saw that, you'll have a hard time connecting as strongly with some of the characters. That said, they're all pretty likeable and the story is easy to follow. It's also exhilarating at times. The action-packed cutscenes more than make up for the surprising number of weird swamp men, talking cats and Pikachu alikes. The Monster Hunter franchise has always been fairly non-committal with its setting and timeline. There's usually a vague sense that they're all set in the same world during different time periods. Wings of Ruin is fairly unique in that it continues the story of existing characters. You play the grandchild of Red, a legendary rider who all the other characters hero worship to an almost fetishistic extent. The events following his disappearance have caused a calamity to befall the land. The Rathalos have migrated while all the other monsters are being driven insane by strange purple lights called Rage Rays. You're aided by Naviru, a character from the anime and previous game. He's a feline, which is not the same as a Palico or a Mealinx. Seriously, cats are a big deal in this universe. With him as your guide, you must help a lineup of other riders and hunters to determine if your newborn Rathalos is the catalyst for the next apocalypse or the key to ending the Rage Rays. As stories go, it's fairly straightforward, but the way it's told here is pretty fantastic. Some of the cutscenes, especially around the midpoint, are pure adrenaline. There's conflict, double-crossing, heroic sacrifices, people jumping onto moving airships, and an awful lot of monsters roaring directly at the camera. Some of those conflicts may wrap up just a little bit too neatly, but it's better than I was expecting nonetheless. It's the combat and the exploration that make this game truly stand out though. In many ways the structure is as formulaic as any Monster Hunter game before it. Despite having a critical path to unlock new features, areas and monsters, you're free to explore any accessible areas. As you roam around the map you'll come across monsters just going about their business. There's over 100 to find if you include the small fry, and many of them are just there to be fought. Defeating an enemy gives you materials with which to craft weapons, armour and support items a la the franchise standard. Different gear possesses different intrinsic skills too. Some will be familiar, like Divine Blessing for example, which can reduce damage taken, but there are new skills too in Wings of Ruin, such as Critical Kinship. This allows the bond between you and your monster companions to grow faster in battle. As usual, choosing which gear to equip is more in depth than simple attack and damage values. While fighting monsters is exhilarating fun, it's not the only way to engage with them. If you force a monster to run from you in battle, it will bolt for its nest. At this point you can follow it to the nest where it sleeps and, in an act of admittedly equal cruelty, choose not to finish it off where it lays, but to steal its offspring instead. Raiding monster nests gives you eggs, which you then hatch at a stable. The beasts that emerge are monsties, a name I struggle to say without gritting my teeth. Whereas monsters must be subdued, monsties are friendly and can be ridden. You can use the right of channeling at any stable to transfer specific genes from one monster to another. You could increase a given monster's health points or add skills to their repertoire that they otherwise wouldn't have. There are scores of genes including rare types, and it's worth exploring every monster den on the map, especially the rare ones, to find all the possible monsters and genes. At any given time, you can choose 5 different monsters to accompany you into the world. The 6th slot is reserved for Ratha, your story companion who can't be swapped out. Each has 1 or 2 abilities that aid in exploration. Some can swim, others can smash through rock walls. Some are able to jump, climb ivy, roar to subdue smaller monsters, or dive underground to retrieve treasure. Most of these abilities aid you in finding scattered chests full of items and gear. A few monsters can disappear completely, allowing you to traverse the map unmolested. Others can highlight specific gather points nearby. The primary function of your monster, though, is to fight beside you. Combat in Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin is a complex but immensely satisfying exercise. Without confounding you, it's a turn-based system that relies on a mesh of mechanics to work. The first of these mechanics involves your loadout. There are 6 weapon types available in Wings of Ruin: Greatsword and Sword and Shield, Hammer and Hunting Horn, Bow and Gun Lance. These occupy 3 tiers: Slash, Blunt and Pierce respectively. Different damage types affect different monster parts. For example, the hammer is really good for breaking heads and armour. If you know the basics of Monster Hunter, you'll pick this stuff up quite quickly. In addition, each weapon type has a variety of skills that can be learned and used in battle. The Hunting Horn, for instance, bestows buffs, while the Greatsword can inflict massive damage. Each skill uses kinship points, which you gain with every turn. At 100 points, you can choose to ride your monster and execute a powerful kinship strike. These are unique for every monster and feature some incredible animations. You can also opt to skip them and speed the battles up completely if you want to. For most of the story, you'll fight alongside other riders or hunters. These are AI-controlled companions, but fill in the roles dictated by their gear. So, the rider who fights with a hunting horn will buff and heal regularly. An archer will lay down as much piercing damage and status build-up as possible. They'll occasionally use healing items, theirs, not yours, but most of the healing will be your responsibility. If you can unleash a kinship strike at the same time as them, the damage is insane. If the combat was no more complex than that, it would be enough. However, there's also a rock, paper, scissors mechanic to consider too. All combatants have a primary focus: strength, speed or technical. Each cancels out one of the others, which leads to head-to-head clashes. If you win, you'll inflict more damage and cancel your opponent's attack. Learning how to read the enemy is essential, especially as the focus switches when they become enraged. Add to this the elemental and status build-ups of certain items, plus a variety of button mashing contests between the monsters, as well as traps, bombs, barrel bombs and various throwing knives, and the combat becomes about as complex a system as I've ever played. And yet, when it all clicks, it's gloriously addictive. Losing a fight will kick you back to the nearest town, but you don't lose much besides your dignity. As you progress through the story, you'll unlock new features. Among other things, there's a tournament mode that will pit you against AI riders or other players. These are incredibly challenging fights against opponents who can do everything you can do, but could also outthink you in ways only other players can. There's also a trials mode where you must defeat monsters within a certain number of turns. And finally, there are co-op expeditions which allow you to explore with your friends. There's so much content in this game at launch that fans of the series or of JRPGs in general could easily put 50 hours in before the story's done, and after that there's still much more to see and do in the endgame. My only real complaint is that, on Switch at least, there are occasional frame rate issues. It also does a weird thing where after a fight it turns you around on the map. I don't know why it does this, but it's annoying. Graphically, it's more functional than stunning. Monster animations are in keeping with the main franchise and the cutscenes are bright and lovely, but some of the environments come off as a little bit bland. There are a few standout features and most areas within a given biome look very similar. It's not a major problem, but it becomes more noticeable when you spend long periods farming or grinding in a particular area. Despite minor issues, I've had so much more fun with Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin than I ever thought I would. It's exciting, funny, good looking and action packed, but it's also full of heart. It's not in competition with Monster Hunter Rise, it exists as its own entity and offers something very different for those who just don't click with the main series for whatever reason. Aside a few very minor issues, Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin is a wonderful adventure, and for that I'm scoring it 9.5 out of 10. Hi, Mick here, hope you enjoyed that review of Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin on Nintendo Switch. It's also available on PC if you'd rather play it there. If you like the review, please hit like and subscribe. Maybe tag that bell icon too so you're kept up to date with everything we post. If you're going to pick up Monster Hunter Stories 2, if you've only played the demo and you're unsure, drop us a line in the comments and we'll have a chat about it. We love that sort of stuff. And if you want to support us via Patreon, you can go ahead and do that. We appreciate everything that you guys do for us. In the meantime, I've been Mick Fraser for God is a Geek. That was a review of Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin, and you guys have been lovely. Bye.